Everyone, welcome to today's session. I hope you all have started watching the HITRUST overview and differentiate between internal and external assessors and the different certifications that one needs to have depending on their roles. So today we're going to continue on the different type of assessment. This is really important, and I will still emphasize it's important for you to have an in-depth understanding on all these core regulatory frameworks because now you can work in any sector, right? Any company. It's important for you all to know this. So, and one more thing, if you are new to our channel, make sure you subscribe, you like, you comment, and also share it with your friends and family. And I really want to thank you all again for doing so. I'm seeing the progress at the back end, so keep doing that for me, please. Thank you. All right, so let's continue today. As I said yesterday, we did cover, oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Let me share my screen. All right. So, um, yesterday we talked on the different type of assessor, being internal, external assessor, if you want to achieve high trust certifications. But we just keep talking about certification now. We'll talk now on the type of assessment, right? Assessment types in high trust. It says high trust offers multiple types of assessment, actually three, that organization can pursue to determine their cybersecurity maturity. And we say of maturity now, we start talking on the best security practices, like how stringent your controls are they effective, are they operational? Okay. Each assessment type offers a different level of assurance depending on the organization's risk exposure, data volumes, regulatory compliance, and other key factors. Okay, so let's take a look. First one, we're going to talk on the 2 years certification, which is a risk-based and the most comprehensive type of assessment known as R2. High trust actually have three types. The first one we're going to talk on is risk-based 2 years assessment called R2. I said the R2 assessment is a risk-based and tolerable evaluation that provides the highest level of assurance. You see, so this one go pretty much granular data depending on your scope, make sure that there's literally everything is more comprehensive. This assessment is ideal for organizations that deal with greater risk exposure due to factors like data volumes, regulatory compliance, or other risk factor. And guess what? Because at the end of the day, depending on the criticality or sensitivity of data types that you collect, you house, the data volume, and you have to be in adherence with different regulatory authorities, then organization would need to go in for high trust if they have to be in compliance with HIPAA in particular for healthcare organization or healthcare sector. Organization will need this high trust compliance. Okay. And again, it says it offers a comprehensive and in-depth approach to risk management and compliance evaluation. And we'll talk again, what's the level of assurance? This is a high level. If you have some of these companies that are accessing or they just limited to healthcare, where they are collecting people's demographic data, they are collecting your social security number, and so many sensitive information. So HIPAA have put in a set of laws that organizations need to do so as to adhere to those laws. And for organizations to adhere to the HIPAA regulations, then they will need to be able to, achieve this high trust, for example. That would say that they are actually adhering to these regulatory authorities, and in the course of doing so, they have all the necessary controls to better protect customer or patients' data. I would say the duration for this type of assessment is 2 years, and it focus is more comprehensive risk-based, as we've said, specification of controls, expanded approach to risk management, and compliance evaluation. So, and I still also want to iterate here that it doesn't matter what regulatory frameworks you go with. Everything again, guys, has to do about security controls. And we'll say this thing they overlap a lot. If you're able to understand, even if NIST 853 is out there, is free, if you're able to have an in-depth understanding on all the needs controls, know how to test those controls, what kind of artifact you'll be requested. Now, it doesn't matter what framework you work with, it's more of, applying concept, mapping those controls. It's pretty much the same, though they have different terminologies, okay? Also, for example, let's say a large healthcare provider with large data volume of patient data and regulatory obligations. You see, we'll definitely touch HIPAA sometime in the future. Regulatory obligations such as HIPAA may opt for a R2 assessment to demonstrate their cybersecurity maturity over the next 2 years. So when you get this certification, then you can demonstrate that you have stringent um, controls in place. You know, if you are an organization even want to like assess a an organization want to like pretty much just say this is a vendor the organization need to assess, then this certification is valid for 2 years. But the fact that it says valid for 2 years doesn't mean that you're not going to be doing Kanban. It's not just a one-time to the period of 2 years. No, yes, even when you go through all the different phases, you achieve the certification, guess what? You still will need to continue with your continuous monitoring. I said this assessment will evaluate a broad range of controls and compliance measure tailored to meet high risk environment. And to me, if you ask me, it doesn't matter if you even evaluate it in these standards. It's a high risk environment. Sorry, it's a high it's an impact level like a high system. If you go with the NIST controls for a high system, it will suffice. Controls remain controls, irrespective of the fact that we are using different frameworks. Okay. But let's look at some of the key characteristics for this. First, again, it just say HITRUST certification. Yes, it's provided a 2 year certification. External assessor requirement. Yes, it does require an external assessor, and this assessor are required. They have been approved by the HITRUST themselves to inspect and validate control implementation. Remember, we make mention of the HITRUST practitioners, you know, as well as a QA quality assurance. And then tailoring to regulation. You see, can be tailored to cover multiple regulations. Do you see that? And that's why, like, it doesn't matter what you do. So it can be tailored to cover multiple regulations like HIPAA, like NIST, like ISO. And that's why I said security controls remain security controls. Okay. And then interim assessment, yes, of course, an interim assessment is required if significant changes occur. And we know what an interim self, right? For example, even just say you are working with a third-party vendor, maybe your SOC 2 Type 2 report will soon be expired and they're expecting the next SOC 2 Type 2 report. You can still go with that vendor if they issue like an interim or gap letter, right? Don't issue something to let you know that this is work in progress. But you see, when they say that a significant change occurred, then you can like literally have that interim assessment that will suffice, right? While making sure that the different item are being remediated or being corrected. For example, we have a healthcare finance or organization with high risk data handling. So we have briefly covered the R2 and the, is it A2 or R2? R2. R2, sorry, yeah. We'll briefly cover the R2, and we know that this is the most comprehensive type of assessment that lasts for 2 years. Guess what? After 2 years, organizations have to go through the re-certification process all over again. And as I said, once you have it, it's not a one-time thing. You still have to continue with assessment of control, continuous monitoring, scanning your system, providing user awareness training. You have to continue with that with a Kanban. Then the next one is the I1 assessment. The I1 assessment also focuses on cybersecurity controls, generally recognized as leading cybersecurity practices. It provides a moderate level of assurance and includes an optional addition of other authority source such as NIST, ISO, HIPAA, or whatever authority source that an organization want to go with. The assessment is also suitable for addressing active cybersecurity threats. And you see the level of assurance, this is a moderate level. If you have a system that is a moderate, impact level is moderate, then you can choose to go with an I1 certification. But guess what? Or assessment type. But this can only last for 1 year. Okay. While R2 is a risk-based comprehensive approach that lasts for 2 years. There was a focus leading cybersecurity practices covering a broader range of active cyber threats. Right? Let's say, for example, a company with moderate data risks might choose the I1 assessment to validate their cybersecurity measures against recognized industry practices. This assessment will help them prepare for the growing range of cyber threats. HITRUST implemented, then we have the I1 assessment also. It says that first, as we've covered, it will last for just, it's a year, 1 year certification. Does it also require external assessor? Yes, it does require external assessor that needs to be authorized or approved by HITRUST. Can we also tailor this control to align with other authoritative sources or framework? Yes, can be tailored to convey assurance over various information protection regulations like HIPAA, NIST, as well as ISO or ISO. And then what of the interim assessment? Can we achieve an interim assessment for this type of um, assessment? No interim assessment is required. So interim assessment is only required for R2. Okay, it's not required for I1. Say, for example, you have a financial institution, which is a mid-sized company or healthcare provider or technology firms who want to achieve the I1 certification. But remember, it can be a moderate system, not necessarily high, after they've categorized their information system. And guess what? You can only achieve certification for 1 year, but still, HITRUST will also need to approve the external auditors that will help you achieve this kind of certification or go through this type of assessment. Then the next one, if you look at the heading, it talk about essentials. So this is an E1 assessment. So with the E1 assessment, this focuses on fundamental cybersecurity practices or good cybersecurity hygiene. It is an entry-level assurance assessment that ensures critical cybersecurity measures are in place. And that's why we thought that it's more of an entry level. And then the keyword fundamental cybersecurity practices or good cybersecurity hygiene, and was a duration for 1 year. A curated set of basic cybersecurity control aimed at ensuring essential cybersecurity hygiene in place. But would this eventually require a certification? Let's see. When is this necessary? For example, a small business or startup company that is looking to implement basic security measure could use the E1 assessment to confirm that they are covering essential cybersecurity practices such as password management, network security, as well as data protection, which makes sense. If it's more of a startup company, we don't even know what we're going to do. We don't know what kind of controls. People are confused. And don't be surprised that there are times that you work for this company that do not even have any even data classification policy. If you don't have a data classification policy, how do you go about even identifying your information type and coming up with the impact levels? And there are times that you see some company that do not even have no documentation. So a company like that, a startup company like that, yes, they might choose to go through the E1 assessment, which makes sense. Or it's a small business to see if you even have the necessarily cybersecurity controls. And that's why we talk of best cybersecurity hygiene. Do I even have that in place? Rather than us watching that, guess what? We want to go through an R2 or an E1, an I1, without even understanding if we have the basic or fundamental control for our system. Then the next one is a targeted assessment. And it says this one is a non-certificated self-assessment. First, it consists only of HITRUST required statement. HITRUST have the required statement that map one or more authoritative sources, just as NIST 171, FedRAMP, or HIPAA. Right? This assessment is designed to help organizations align their controls with specific regulations, frameworks without pursuing full certification. So maybe you want to map out, you want to see if your system align with either one of the authoritative sources that we've mentioned. Then you might choose to go with a targeted assessment. That's why there's talk of self-assessment. And this one, you do not need any certification. Also, it's just duration. No, you don't need to receive any certification. So it's just more of like a self-assessment to understand if your principle or system align with maybe your target, you want to see if you align or adhere to any of this other framework they said that mapping. And that's why I say a focused evaluation that only address specific controls required by certain regulations or framework. And that's why you have the different regulation or frameworks. So you can take the high trust required statement and then to see, you can map it out to see, if it all aligns. And that's why we call it targeted assessment. So an example of a targeted assessment could be a cloud service provider that is seeking to align with FedRAMP Cloud could use targeted assessment to evaluate their practices against FedRAMP requirement without necessarily pursuing a full HITRUST certification. So let's look at some of the key characteristics of the targeted assessment. No HITRUST certification is required. Non-external auditors is required because this is just a self-assessment. You can just use this to map with other standard or framework like the NIST, FedRAMP, or HIPAA. There's no interim assessment required for this, again, since it's just self-assessed. And then as example of use, maybe specific regulatory alignment as we have mentioned. So just to sum it up, now we realize that only R2 we need an interim assessment, right? I1 and as well as E1 will not. So R2 will last for 2 years. It's a comprehensive type of assessment, risk-based approach that will last for 2 years. We need an external assessor being authorized by HITRUST themselves. Why for I1 is a duration of 1 year and is suitable for, R2 is suitable for a high system, perform a deep analysis of all those controls, actually a broader scope of controls. Then for your I1 is a moderate system that certification can only last for 1 year. Still, you're gonna also require external auditors that are being approved, recognized by HITRUST, but they will not need any interim assessment. Why for E1 is also a fundamental assessment that organization will want to see if they really align or have best security practices. Maybe if it's a startup company, a small business, maybe they are thinking of achieving HITRUST compliance. Then you go through that phase first to even understand, what is needed for you. Do I even have the necessary controls? Then you can achieve that fundamental certification. That's the A1. Why for targeted assessment? Targeted actually is just more of a self-assessment. One organization might want to map their control with one or either two authoritative sources, like the NIST or ISO or HIPAA, whatever. But this is just more of a self-assessment to understand. That's why we say that it doesn't require any certification. And of course, it doesn't even require a HITRUST external auditors, okay? Yeah, and this part, I really like this one because it's really important. And this is something that I've also iterated a lot, in our videos, that when you are watching our YouTube videos, the other way you can benefit, now we have different playlists. So you need to make sure you go to the different playlists on our channel. And the way you can benefit better is by watching from the oldest video to the most recent video, okay? From the oldest to the most recent. That's how you're going to benefit. You can't just go there. We'll have plenty of videos. You can't just go there and just jump and feel like, this is it. No. So you start watching from the oldest to the most recent. And that's why if you look at this slide, it said that the R2, the I1, and the E1 assessment form a transversable portfolio. Transversable, meaning that each builds upon the previous one, right? Likewise, for you to understand this particular video I'm making, you need to watch the first video because it's a continuation from where I ended, right? And that's why being a transversable portfolio means that once you achieve your E1 certificate, remember that's like fundamental best security hygiene. Then from there, you can move now to the I1, which is moderate, where they will actually have set of control that will come again, assess you, issue it. And then from I1, you can choose to go up to R2, which R2 is more risk-based approach, more comprehensive method of, assessing your security controls, right? And this literally covered the slide as it says that the E1 assessment include basic cybersecurity practices and serve as a foundation. The I1 assessment adds advanced security practices and covers broader cybersecurity threats, while the R2 assessment provides a comprehensive risk-based evaluation with an expanded approach to risk management and compliance. tailored for high-risk environment. For example, let's say a startup company, this is something that we've covered. A startup company again will choose the E1 assessment to ensure essential cybersecurity hygiene and in place as the business grows and handle more sensitive data. It may transition from E1, to a broader cybersecurity threat to cover a broader cybersecurity threat. So transition from E1 to I1 assessment. And again, for highly regulated industries such as healthcare, finance, the company could eventually move now from I1 to I2 assessment, which is a more comprehensive approach. And this literally covers everything that we've said so far. We've had the characteristics, we have E1, I1, and R2. Can they can result in HITRUST certification? Yes, they can all result in HITRUST certification. Length of duration, these two for 1 year and the other one for 2 years. Final report share via exchange, absolutely. Certification over NIST cybersecurity framework, nope, nope. Yes, this can actually go. Certification over AI intelligence, yes. Can result in inside report, yes. Readiness assessment allowed, yes. We're going to go through readiness assessment shortly. Require external assessor, absolutely. Interim assessment required, nope, for the first two, and of course for R2. Bridging through HITRUST bridge certificate, no for 2 and yes for R2. Must use a current CFS version. No, this one is a no because this one, as we said, is more risk-based approach and a more comprehensive stuff. So what's our takeaway from this? It says that HITRUST offers multiple assessment types, R2, I1, E1, and targeted assessment to help organizations assess their cybersecurity maturity based on their risk profile, compliance needs, and industry requirements. By understanding the differences and characteristics of each assessment, HITRUST can choose the right assessment type to meet their goals and ensure that security and compliance standards are up to date. So that actually covers the type of assessment. We'll briefly cover the three types of assessment. That's the R1, the R2, the I1, as well as the E1. But we briefly introduced readiness, right? So now we'll start talking about the differences between readiness assessment and validated assessment. Now it says that HITRUST, and that's to cut me before I even continue. I think we have session with our student where they play the role, I think I mentioned in last video. They play the role of the ISO, self-assessor, external assessor. So when you work in-house for a company, many a time you hear yourself saying that or preparing your organization, towards you are leading, you are preparing towards a readiness annual assessment. Maybe we have company coming in every year to assess your organization security posture, or maybe you want to achieve some form of certification. You have to go through the readiness assessment. You got to be ready, right? It's just like you want to be a house, you have to be ready. You start by maybe like shopping, go visit different site, maybe a builder where you want to go with, or you want to start from scratch. So it's a process. So you go through those process. Once you see something that you like, then you might look for a loan, somebody that can, a lender that can borrow you that loan. Or you can even do that before. It doesn't matter how you go about it, to the process of them building the house, you moving in, putting like different furnitures and all those things. So likewise, this is a process too. Each time an organization is expecting third party or external auditors coming in to assess their environment, or maybe, or better still, they are working or they want to achieve some form of certification. It can be maybe FedRAM, it can be ISO 20701, it can be HITRUST or whatever, or a SOC 2. So you have to go through that readiness process, okay? Oh. I said, HITRUST offers readiness assessment as a useful tool for organization to prepare for validated assessment. This assessment helps organizations identify gaps and take corrective actions before the validated assessment. is conducted. While readiness assessment provide valuable insight, they are not reviewed by HITRUST for quality assurance. You get? While readiness assessment provide valuable insight, they are not reviewed by HITRUST for quality assurance. Remember, and that's why I said, if you look at this video very well, you can even understand quality assurance if you didn't watch the last video. You need to go and watch the last video, right? We have the certified practitioner, HITRUST practitioner, and they also have the HITRUST quality assurance. For you to become a HITRUST quality assurance personnel, then you need to also be a certified practitioner before. And that's why I say when you're going through the readiness assessment, then they cannot be reviewed by the quality assurance, meaning that their reliability is lower compared to validated assessment. And this make the difference because readiness in-house, we want to put stuff together. Then, but what does it mean for a validated assessment? Let's continue with our slide. Steve, what is a readiness assessment? A readiness assessment is a preparatory self-assessment. Do you guys get the word? That's why I don't know if you've been able to catch it. I said when you work as a self-assessor, work as a self-assessor for that company, where you have to collaborate with different stakeholders, different personnel within your organization. If you want to go through the readiness get your ready, we're going to the readiness program, still you're going to be working with people. And through that readiness, then will come now validation from the external auditors. But now he said a readiness assessment is a preparatory self-assessment performed by organizations to evaluate their current state against HITRUST requirements. It helps identify gaps in their cybersecurity practices before undergoing validated assessment. Do you see? Before even thinking of going through the validated assessment, so your readiness help you identify gaps. For example, I've definitely worked on this, stuff like this, help organization, through their readiness process, where you, again, as I said, you got to be working with different people. You need to first of all make sure that your policy are updated. You have the most current security policies in place. Who is doing what? For example, for the AT control family, are you guys providing user awareness training? 8 years. Do you have artifacts to back it that up? When users are hired, do they have to take the awareness training? Yes. After the completion of the awareness training, are they issued a certificate of completion? And also, when they stayed 1 year for the organization, do they also need to take it? Yes. If yes, do they issue certificate of completion? Because if external or validators are coming in to validate your controls or to assess your controls, this is the kind of artifacts they also want to check, right? Or better still, you say your organization is going with incident response plan. With the incident response, you guys also have an after action report. Do you guys do the simulation? Do you send like phishing email? Or could it be a tabletop exercises where you, depending on the company that you work for, in one of my role, like work as a manager, it was a software development company. So I already worked the team alone, they were all like advanced and well landed, so I can't be going with phishing. So we have to do something related to the product that they manage. Say for example, if someone throw their keys into a public GitHub repository, what happened, like the case that happened with Uber data breach. So this is the kind of things that you want to do. If we claim that whatever thing that we do we have an after action report that we have to produce everything that we've done? Or maybe still some of you are database administrators. Remember that time and again, you have to patch your database. If you patch your database, you have all those documented on your policy. Do I have reports of that? Or better still, if you also or better still, when you all are doing disaster recovering, where you have to do a follow-up of your database and all those things, is it being documented? You know that those are all security controls, right? Where you are taking backup of your databases, all security control you guys have in place, right? Encryption, you guys are doing some form of TDE, table data encryption or something like that. Those are all controls, okay? And that's why it says a readiness assessment is a preparatory self-assessment performed by organizations to evaluate their current state against HITRUST requirements. It helps identify gaps in their cybersecurity practices before undergoing validated assessment, right? So what's the purpose? First, to assess security practice, to assess current cybersecurity maturity, to identify and remediate gaps before a formal validated assessment. Remember, we've already talked on that. Validated assessment, we're going to discuss that shortly. Also to track progress towards high trust milestone, because you have to go through the readiness. And that's why a lot of our role, this is just form of you managing risks, because doing that, you make sure your controls are effective, they're operational, working with different stakeholders and collecting artifacts, verifying the artifacts to make sure that everything is working. Right, but look at the process of readiness assessment for an R2 at a high level. But again, sometime in the future, we'll go in depth, right? Again, I went to their website. It's great. All this content, I got it from their website and just have to put it, in stable action form. That way you guys can understand better. They said that the organizations fill out scoping questionnaire. Remember, I think I've mentioned more than how many times on how important scoping is, right? You need to understand what is inclusive, what they're gonna be doing. And each time organization do that, when they go to the high trust my CFS to determine the scope of the assessment, the question not focus on different aspects. First, is focused on general, focus on organizational, geographical, systematic, as well as compliance. For example, what industry standard is it? Organization, the company structure, region-based compliance requirement. Again, if you are in California, you know that it doesn't matter what you do, you also have to be adherence with the CCPA, that's a California Consumer Privacy Act. And I think New York also have some form of regulatory bodies. Canada, they do have a lot of region or its province regulatory body as well. South Africa also have a privacy framework in place, right? Therefore, systematic and systematic, we talk about the technology structure. This is something that we're going to discuss in depth, of course, sometime in the future. And then for compliance, maybe what authoritative sources you guys go with, regulations like can be HIPAA, FISMA, and the like. So based on the responses of my high trust framework, this my CFA would generate a customized high trust controls, references, and requirement statement. Do you see? So based on the question that you have answer, then you have a set of controls, references, and a required statement. And that is your guide now that will give you, once you have that set of controls, of course, you know what, that's where you will take it. Make sure that you guys have all those things in place before you bring in external validator, right? So once you get that, follow up, make sure those controls are being implemented, work with different stakeholders, collect those artifacts, and that's it. While for I1 and E1 readiness, there's the requirement statement are predefined, right? And the organization can add authoritative sources. So with this predefined statement, they're already predefined. That's why it's predefined. So, you with that, you can add either authoritative sources that you have to expand the scope. If you guys have NIST, HIPAA, and ISO, whatever, then you can add that to expand the scope, but those are already predefined stuff that they have for you guys. Then what of the assessment control methodology? It says the assess entity, that's a company or their designee, assesses compliance by scoring each control on its maturity level. Remember, if we go back here, you said that once you do that, they will give you control references and requirement statement. And now, how do you go about that? So in the course of you doing that for R2, do you see R2, because this contract will be implemented, we are trying to go through or to achieve the R2 certification, where it will definitely work in-house, internal assessor, we covered that already, external assessor, and then going through the validation processes. So once we have that control reference, then we also need to score each control based on the maturity level. Is it a score 1, 2, 3, 4? Based on what you have on your policy, you guys are doing that. Are that control really implemented and effective? And that's why you're going to provide a score. For example, let's say that a control that want to access, let's talk about maybe unsuccessful logon. that when people put in wrong password 3 times, we actually limit it to 3 attempts. If you put in a wrong password for consecutively 3 times, then it should lock you out, right? So that's something that we have. So if I'm assessing that control and I want to issue a maturity score against this control, so is this something that we have, or do we just put it there in our policy for fancy? And when I check, somebody will come up with 5 passwords and nothing happens, right? And if it locks it out, what actions take over? Does it mean that they have to, the sysadmin or maybe the technical force or IT or help desk supports would have to unlock that person account? Oh, like literally, it's just what your policy have. So whatever thing you have on your policy, that's exactly how we go about it, right? And then also from level 1 to level 5, and for E1 as well as I1 and E1 at the level of the implementation, right? Remember, these are all predefined, set of reference control references that they will issue you, but this come at the level of the implemented level, while the other one, you have to score all the control that will be implemented to come up with a maturity level. So after that, what happened? Of course, you definitely have a correction action plan. For the correction action plan, remember this again, we are still going through the readiness assessment in HITRUST. For a correction action plan or CAPS, the organization define any gaps and generate CAPS, that's correction action plans to remedy them. So once you've identified that, maybe once I got that, I realized, you know what, we have this control, or we have a gap, we've not even implemented this control, we have to do it. That is the gap. And each time we have it based on our knowledge on RMF as pertaining to NIST, that's something that we are covered. So we want to also, that's when if it's NIST, now we start talking of POEM, then you have to create your POEM, plan of action and milestone. But you see the type of correction action plan. So this is just POEM. Right. And that's why I tell you people, once you understand one, then you definitely understand the other. There, they are calling of correction action plans. NIST will tell you of POEM, right? And then we'll go to ISO, we'll also see what ISO is telling us, right? So with that gap now, you have to document, follow up with the correction plan, have that in your radar, see it in terms of priority, what you're going to be doing, and just to make sure you hit that milestone, right? So same principle applies here. Then after that, what happens? You report generation. We have as an optional one. They say after scoring, the access entity, that's the organization, can submit their report for an optional report from HITRUST, right? You can do that because after doing, you've corrected all, remediated all the different, go through the correction action plans, fix everything. Then it's up to you if you want an optional report. But do you see this optional report as pertaining to the readiness assessment in HITRUST? Readiness assessment do not undergo HITRUST quality assurance. So that will not go through a QA review. Remember, the QA now is a higher person, right? So it will not go through a QA review, meaning they provide lower reliability than validated assessment. Remember, this is still at the level of readiness. We've not gone through validated at all, right? So you can send opt in for a report generation, but it will not go through the quality assurance, and still you cannot expect 100% perfection from their review. Okay. For example, let's say Tech Bank conducts a readiness assessment for its R2 certification. After completing the risk-based scoping questionnaire, TechBank identified gaps in its encryption protocol and creates a correction action plan to address them before the formal assessment. So I believe that really makes sense. It covers everything that we've been discussing. Then for validated assessment, let's see what validated assessment is. We'll try and conclude the slide and then we'll take it next time. Okay. For validated assessment, what is a validated assessment? A validated assessment is a formal evaluation by the HITRUST authority, authorized external assessor to determine if an organization meets the HITRUST CFA standard. Unlike the readiness assessment, a validated, you hear the word validation, validated assessment is official, is QA review, and result in a certification if the organization meet the necessary standards. So readiness is something in-house that we're still trying to get ready, trying to put everything, make sure we go through the correction actions and everything. But now for it to be validated, now we start talking of HITRUST approved or authorized external assessor as well as a QA assessor, which could be the practitioner or a QA, right? And each time we are going through that, then if everything looks good, then we can meet or get the certification. What's the purpose of validated assessment? To evaluate whether an organization's cybersecurity practices meet HITRUST standards, to obtain HITRUST certification, to undergo an official thorough review by a third-party external assessor. Then, what are the process of validated assessment for our R2? We have the risk-based scoping that we've mentioned for R2 assessment that organization will have to receive a 2-year certification. Like the readiness assessment, the assess entity begins by completing the scoring questionnaire, right? Likewise, if we're going through the readiness, now we want to go through the readiness is to first of all make sure, okay, we are ready. Now we want the validators to come in and validate our system, our controls. So it's likewise, just like also filling out, completing the scoring questionnaire. So they'll also have to fill out the questionnaire to define the assigned scope, right? Remember scoping again. Why for I1 and E1 validator assessment, we say these are all predefined requirement statements which are being used, and the organization may add authoritative sources such as NIST, ISO, HIPAA for a combined assessment. Okay, compliance scoring. It says the access entity or their designee assign maturity level for each requirement statement, something that we've covered already. Likewise, once you get that control reference, you also need to assign maturity level. I spent so much time, providing different examples and scenarios. Why for the R2, again, we have a maturity level for up to 5, from 1 to 5. Why again for I1 and E1 is being done at the implementation maturity level. The what of external assessor role. So once an organization has submitted a compliance score, the entity, that's the access entity, will also submit the my CFL object to the external auditor for validation. So with everything that you've done, then you have to submit that for an external auditor. And remember, this auditor will need to be authorized by HITRUST, while the external assessor tests and verifies the processes or responses using the HITRUST testing procedure. So of course, HITRUST do have a testing procedure that once they've done it, they have to go test it to go, to make sure everything works, right? Then once the external assessor complete the testing, then the access entities sign the management representation letter. Remember this step, we do not have that for readiness because we are not dealing with the external validators or assessor. We're still more of like in-house, trying to see if our system, if everything is good. Like that's what talk of readiness, right? And the validated report agreement. So once external auditor completes the testing, the assessed entity signs the management representation letter and the validated report agreement. And what happens? Then followed by a correction action plans. Because each time they do their testing, I said I have to create a video to put on YouTube where we'll have to go through SAR, security assessment report. Remember, I went through SAP, that's a security assessment plan. And this thing, they are just pretty much the same, right? For this, before they go there, you have to submit SAP, which tell you what we're going to be doing, have auditing in scope. So once you go there, you finish with your assessment, then you need to come up with a report. Then they will start about security assessment report, right? Why now here they come now with, a correction action plans, right? Based on the report, whatever thing they've seen based on their findings. If the assessment identifying gaps are created and validated by the external assessor, right? So once they've done it and then there's any gaps, any like weaknesses, then this gap will be created and by the external auditor themselves and will be validated by them. Because again, just like the needs that we cover RMF, when those assessor goes in, the assess, they have to come with their final report that they'll have to give you like, the actual report and their findings. So same principle applies here. Then remember now, for readiness, we didn't have quality QA, quality assurance, but for validation, we need to have it, right? Because once a practitioner, high trust practitioner, once they've tested, then it also have to go through the QA, right? And that's why I say high trust perform a QA review of the validated assessment result. If necessarily, high trust will follow up with the assessed entity or external assessor for clarification, right? And then now we're talking about the certification process. So upon successful completion of the QA review and scoring the threshold, the access entity received the high trust certification report. But remember, once all the correction action, everything has been created and validated by the external assessor, then the QA will also have to review that. That's the high trust QA quality assurance. Then you go through the process now of certification. Everything works well. If the scoring threshold is not met, the organization receive a validated only report. Remember, because QA again will have, it doesn't matter if the external assessor did and everything. That's why I said if that threshold is still not met, that organization will receive only a validated report, which does not include certification. So what happened after this, right? So apparently, if it's not met, then you got to do all it takes to meet if you want to achieve your certification. An inside report for R2 assessment, if the assessment include compliance factors like NIST, HIPAA, an inside report can be requested, right? If you also include, that's what we kept talking about, authoritative sources. If you include such standard or framework, then you can also request for an inside report, which provide detailed information on the organization conformity with the authoritative resource or sources, right? Conformity, what they've done, like what is working, just to see what they've done and how it also map and aligns to these older standards. Say, for example, we have Health Secure, a healthcare provider undergoes a validated assessment for R2 certification. After completing the MyCFS questionnaire and assessing its control maturity, the results are reviewed and validated by an external assessor, right? After passing the QA review, Health Secure received their high trust certification report. And now we just have a comprehensive readiness report and validated assessment report. So let's see what we've covered summarizes, and hopefully next class we'll see what we're going to cover in detail. Okay. So one characteristic, we have readiness assessment, we have validated assessment. Classification, certification. Readiness, no, we do not need any certification. For validated, yes, we do. Level of assurance, readiness is just lower because it's more of a self-assessment within the company. Why validated is definitely higher because you'll be involving external assessor or third-party assessor. What of the quality assurance review? No, we do not need any quality assurance review because again, this is just self-assessment within organization. But for validated assessment, absolutely we need a high trust QA review. And what's the purpose for this type of assessment? One, for readiness assessment, you identify gaps and remediate before formal assessment. Formal, which is the validated assessment. Why? For validated assessment, official evaluation and certification. Then require for certification. Does readiness require any certification? No, we do not. But validated, yes, we do. Report generation is optional for readiness, right? After doing that, you can actually request a report of generation. We went through that, but it's mandatory for high trust. And then control maturity scoring, assess entities self-scoring, right? Remember, it was a no. Why? Again, for scoring, we said that, and for readiness, again, for E1 and E2, I think we may mention the level of implementation, but for validated external assessor, validation is required. And what is the takeaway after everything we've covered? Both readiness assessment and validated assessment are essential part of high trust certification process. Readiness assessment help organizations identify gaps and prepare for formal validated assessment. While useful for internal purposes, readiness assessment do not result in certification and lack a QA review. On the other hand, validated assessment are required for high trust certification and involve an official review by an external assessor and high trust QA procedures, providing a more reliable and certified outcome. Correct? Yes. So next session, we'll go through, do an overview of the HITRUST R2 validated assessment workflow. And you see, it said that it has 16 steps. So we'll take our time and go through this workflow, the 16 step, like how it's been done. And then we'll go through like each of them. It's interesting, guys. So make sure you subscribe, make sure you share with your friends and family. This is a lot of information to be providing for free. Just make sure you subscribe and share with your friend and family. That way people can also benefit from this training. And thank you all. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye. I'll see you all in the next video.